Hey everybody, and welcome back to Code Interpret. So let's have a look at question number 9. In the namespace Pluto, there is a single pod named Holy API. It has been working for a while now, but Team Pluto needs it to be more reliable. Convert the pod into a deployment named Holy API with 3 replicas and delete the single pod once done. The raw pod template file is available at this location. In addition, the new deployment should set allow privilege escalation and privileged false for the security context on the container level. Please create the deployment and save its YAML under that location. Okay, so the thing is that we're going to be working on our local environment, and we're going to have to reconstruct the question, but in the question, you wouldn't need to create these resources, especially the pod, because it would already be provided in the namespace Pluto, and they'll also give you a template file for it. Okay. The only thing that we need to do here is to use that template file, convert it into a deployment according to the specs provided over here. Okay. And in this paragraph. Okay, and then in the end, we just need to create the YAML of the deployment and save it over here. Okay, so let's just summarize everything. We need to create a pod. Let's do everything, step by step. Create a pod by the name of Holy API. Okay, and let's use the image nginx. And then dry run and create a YAML for it. Call it, okay, it should be known as Holy API pod YAML. Okay, now we also need to create the namespace called Pluto. Okay, now let's edit the YAML file. So if you're using your VS Code, you can actually easily update everything over here. But I'm used to working on the shell itself, so whichever way you prefer working on. Okay, now what's missing over here? We need to set the namespace to Pluto, and that's it. Colon and WQ would save it. And then let's deploy this. Okay, let's check get pods in the namespace Pluto. Okay, so it's being created. It's running now. Because now we have the YAML as well as the pod is running. Okay, now this is where the question tells us to use that YAML file to create a deployment with the following configuration. Okay, A, it should have 3 replicas, and then B, it should we need to define the security context as privileged to be false, and then allow privileged escalation. Okay, to be false. Okay, so looking at the deployment, now the thing is that how do we convert this into a deployment? So we'll need to change the API version, the kind, and then add a template section and the definition of the deployment. So if you don't know the configuration and the specs and what section to add in a deployment, which is okay, which is fine. So you just refer to the Kubernetes documents. Okay, so you come over here and write deployment. Okay. And go to the deployment section. So let's look at this. Okay. So we need to change the API version, the kind, and we need to add a replica and then a selector. This is like really important, okay, because a deployment, what it does is that if it's creating 3 replicas of the pod, it needs to have a label, a match label, so it knows what to call the pod, okay, and which pod to match, okay, because you might have other deployments deployed in your cluster, and we need to make sure that Kubernetes ensures that it matches and creates pods with this label, okay, with the same label. All right, and the other thing that we need to make sure is that other deployments should not be using the same label, okay, otherwise Kubernetes wouldn't be able to manage and would get confused like which pod to manage, okay, which deployment pod to manage. So that is something. And then even if you try to create a deployment with the same label, another deployment with the same label, it would prompt you and would tell you that it's not going to work, okay. So, and then, okay, so let's try and understand what this is. We now know what match labels are. This section, this entire section defines the pod, okay? And the template section defines the metadata of the pod. And this is where the container comes. This is the definition of the container inside the pod, okay? So in most cases, we have only a single container inside a pod, but if you need a side container, then you can have or define multiple containers, and we can look into that in a separate question, okay? So how do we do this? There's several ways. We could just simply copy this, okay, and create a new file for the dep. Let's call it dep yaml. And Control-Shift-V. Now, this is okay, but it's telling us to call the deployment, give it a name. Should be called Holy API deployment. I haven't really specified the name of the deployment, but you could just use the same name as the file. Okay, and we can leave the label as it is. The replicas should be 3, and this is fine. And this is where just delete everything, okay, and open up your pod YAML, copy it from here all the way till the end, and paste it, okay. You just highlight it and press tab. Keep pressing tab. Wait. So if you're not sure about the indentation, you can cross-check the indentation from the documentation, so spec, and you need to leave like 2 spaces in between each indent, okay? And okay, so the spec is supposed to come under metadata. So looks good. And we can call the container deployment. Now comes the security context. Okay, so the security context is something that you can specify outside the container, okay, or inside the container, because the question has already asked us to ensure it is specified. The security context is on the container level, okay? So just write security context. If you're using VS Code, it would autocomplete, so that would be kind of helpful for you. And privileged to false. Okay, so just to make sure that it's like nicely or correctly indented, you can just come over here and write security context and click on the first link, configure security context. And see, it's correct. Now we need to make sure to let's look for privileged is not there. Okay, so what we can do, another way to do this is type kubectl explain pods, and you don't really need to memorize this, because if you keep working on Kubernetes, you tend to learn the layers of configuration, and therefore we know that it starts from a spec, a pod, okay, and then we do containers. So this is another way to find out the keys and properties of the spec section of the container in a pod, okay? And then security context, and then use the recursive flag. Okay, so inside the container, it has this, and then privileged is right there. So the thing is that if you see this, the square brackets, it basically indicates that these two values are supposed to be placed in a list format, okay? And if there is nothing, if you have like a data type defined in it, that means privilege itself is a key, and you just need to define the value using a colon, okay, just the way we did over here. And what about security context itself? So if security context itself was an array or a list, it would have had the square brackets mentioned over here. Since it doesn't, so that means it's fine, okay? If it was a list, it would have been like this, okay? But it's not a list. Okay, so this was like another quick way to look for the items of a container. So now that we've defined this precisely, and we have the name and the labels and the replicas, let's just make sure that everything is fine. Okay, so press Control S and let's deploy this. Create fdeb.yaml. Okay, let's look at the error says spec template.status. Okay. This needs to be all the way here. Now let's check kubectl get deployment and Pluto. Okay, so the deployment has been created, but it's not in the namespace Pluto. Let's add the namespace Pluto and kubectl get deployment. Okay, so it's working now. And then it wants us to delete the existing pod. So delete the pod and what was it called? Holy API. Holy API. Need to mention the namespace. And now we're good to go. Okay, just the last part of the question. It says we need to save the YAML of the deployment at this location, okay? So just copy this. I'm just gonna show you how you can do it. Like, you know, save your time and do it like really quickly because it has some subfolders. Let's just paste this here. Okay, so if you need to create this folder and this, there's like OPT course and 9. You can just do mkdir, use the p flag for parent, okay, and then OPT course and 9. Okay, ls opt. So it has all the folders created. Now just write touch and paste this. CD. Let's check if that file was created. Yep. Now press VI and the name of the file. So I'm just showing you how to do it and, you know, save all your time. Just copy this. And if you're working on the VI editor, you'll have to press Control Shift and V to paste it. And then press Escape :WQ and exclamation. This would save it. Okay, and that's it. This completes your question. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'll be more than happy to respond to your questions. And probably from the next question onwards, I'm going to be uploading the answers on my GitHub repo. So in case if you guys want, you guys can verify your answers and check the steps from there. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.